So, what is God? And what is he really like? I mean, that's got to be one of the biggest, most universal questions anybody has ever asked. In this explainer, we're going to dive right into that question and explore the very nature of the divine.
To get our heads around this, let's start with a thought experiment. Just take a second and really think about this. What is the greatest being you could possibly imagine? This simple but honestly profound idea comes from a medieval theologian named Anselm, and it's going to be our compass for this whole journey.
This idea is the foundation for something called perfect being theology, and the core concept is pretty straightforward. God isn't just kind of powerful or pretty smart, he's the greatest conceivable being. That means any quality we think of as great, power, knowledge, goodness, God has it to the absolute maximum perfect degree. It's not just a random list of superpowers, it's a totally coherent picture of perfection.
Now, to build this picture, we're going to walk down two paths that actually run side by side. The first one is biblical revelation, what the scriptures say God has revealed about himself, and the second one is logical reason, what we can figure out just by thinking hard about the world and our existence. Both of them are absolutely essential guides.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We'll kick things off with God's most basic nature as the uncreated creator. Then we'll get into his infinite power and knowledge. From there, we'll look at his character as the ultimate standard for goodness. We'll explore what the Bible calls the heart of God. And then we'll wrap it all up to see why this paints a picture of a personal being and not just some cosmic force. So let's get right into it, starting with the most fundamental thing about God, the very ground of his being. First up is a kind of fancy word, aseity, but it stands for a really simple idea, self-existence. Just think about it for a second. Everything you see, everything you can touch, including you, it all depends on something else to exist. A tree came from a seed, you came from your parents. But God, he's completely different. His existence comes from his own nature. He is the uncaused cause, the uncreated creator. He doesn't depend on anything. And that leads us right into another mind-bending concept, God's eternality. Now, this doesn't just mean he's really, really old. It means he has no beginning and no end. He doesn't experience time like we do, as a sequence of moments, one after the other. He actually exists outside of time's limits, able to see the whole timeline, past, present, and future, all at once.
Okay, so with that foundation in place, let's get to those famous Omni attributes. These are the words that help us understand the incredible scale of God's power and knowledge.
So, let's take on that classic riddle you've probably heard. If God is all-powerful, can he make a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? Now, it sounds like a trick question, right? But it actually helps us get super clear on what being all-powerful really means. The thing is, God's omnipotence means he can do anything that is logically possible and lines up with his perfect nature. Asking him to make a square circle or a rock too heavy for an all-powerful being isn't really a task, it's just a meaningless string of words. It's a contradiction. So the limit isn't God's power, the limit is just logic. It has to make sense. And here's another deep one that comes up all the time. If an all-knowing God already knows every single choice I'm going to make, does that mean I'm not actually free? Is my life just, on pre-recorded playback? The key here is the huge difference between knowing something and causing something. Think of it this way. Say you're watching a replay of a basketball game. You know exactly what shot the player is about to take. But does your knowing it cause them to take the shot? Of course not. In the same way, God's omniscience means he knows the choices you will freely make. His knowledge makes the future certain to him, but it doesn't make it fated for you. His knowledge tracks our choices. It doesn't force them.
This seems like a pretty simple question, doesn't it? If God is real, where is he? Up in the sky? In a building? Well, the answer's way more profound than you might think.
So God is omnipresent, but that does not mean he's spread out across the universe like some kind of invisible fog. He's an immaterial spirit, which means he actually transcends physical space altogether. He isn't in space. You could say space is in him. He is fully present, fully active, and totally aware at every single point in the universe, all at the same time. It's like the Bible says, even the highest heaven cannot contain you. Okay, so far we've been talking about God's capabilities, what he can do. But now we need to pivot and talk about his character, who he is. And that begins with understanding God as the ultimate standard of goodness. The starting point for God's moral character is his holiness. You can think of it like a core of pure, blinding light that's completely separate from any darkness.
Holiness means God is totally separate from and even hostile to all moral evil. He isn't just a good being. He is the very definition of pure goodness itself. He's the standard that everything else is measured against.
And because God is perfectly holy, he must also be perfectly just. You see, justice is just holiness in action. A perfectly good and holy God can't just look the other way at wrongdoing or pretend it didn't happen. That would violate his own perfect nature. And this creates a pretty profound problem, right? How can flawed people like us ever relate to a God who is perfectly holy and just?
That problem finds its answer right here, in the attributes that the Bible describes as the very heart of God. These are the qualities that create a bridge between a perfect creator and an imperfect world. This quote from the book of Exodus is one of the earliest times God directly describes himself in the Bible. And just notice, when God talks about his own character, he doesn't lead with his power or his knowledge. He leads with this: merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. That tells us that his compassionate, relational nature is absolutely central to who he is. Two huge expressions of this love are mercy and grace, and it's really helpful to know the difference. Mercy is God not giving us the punishment we actually deserve. Grace is God actively giving us the goodness and kindness that we absolutely do not deserve. They don't cancel out his justice. They work in perfect harmony with it to open up a way for us to connect with him.
Okay, let's pull all these different threads together, because this is so important. These attributes aren't separate parts in a machine. They are the unified, completely coherent qualities of one single being.
So when we step back and look at the whole portrait, what do we see? We see a being whose foundation is self-existence and eternality. His scale is all-powerful and all-knowing. His reach is ever-present. He is the perfect standard of holiness and justice. And at his very core, his heart is one of abundant love and mercy.
And here is the absolute bottom line. When you combine perfect knowledge, perfect power, perfect justice, and perfect love, you don't get some vague, impersonal energy like the Force. You get a personal, purposeful being. A being with a mind, a will, and a consistent character. A being who can actually be known.
And that brings us to our last question, which really is for you to think about. If this coherent picture from both reason and revelation is really who God is, what could that mean for you?